Okay, today Poo Poo Daddy Powell went and testified in front of Congress, and it looks like he had a little bit of dumpiness to add to the markets. So let's see why Poo Poo Powell poo-pooed on the chest of the bulls, and if we're going to continue lower or if we're getting ready for a bounce.
It's a complex problem. Interest rates are a single, we know, blunt tool. Raising interest rates can't rebuild our supply chains and fix demand imbalances from the pandemic. Raising interest rates won't end Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. Raising interest rates won't prevent avian flu from devastating 1/3 of our egg supply or weather disasters from destroying key crops. And raising interest rates certainly won't stop big corporations from exploiting all of these crises to jack up prices far beyond the increase in their costs.
No, but having a healthy economy will make us better suited to be able to deal with these issues whenever they do arise.
And not only will higher interest rates not solve it, if they're overdone, they'll make it worse. We can't risk undermining one of the successes of our current economy. For the first time in decades, workers are finally starting to get a little power in this economy. Unemployment's at a historic low, 3.4%. That's not just a number. That means Americans have more opportunities, more options, even in places that have seen a lot in recent years. It means people have the power to demand raises and retirement security and paid sick days and some control over their schedules.
It also means that people don't have to do their job or really even give a damn about their job because they know they can just walk out the door and right into the next business and get hired right away. Have you guys been to any kind of restaurants or anything like that recently? Not only is the prices out of control, there's not even good service anywhere, and nobody gives a damn about their jobs because they know that they're not going to make enough money, for one thing, to be able to go and enjoy the same luxury, but also because they know that they can go get another job just as easily. And not only can they get another job, but they'll probably even be getting paid more at that other job.
Means more Americans have the dignity that comes with a good job that provides for your family. We must here ensure that all Americans have the opportunity for that dignity of work.
Really what we're doing is taking the dignity away from people who have worked really hard to build up a small business and making it impossible for them to be able to actually hire people at a reasonable wage and to be able to offer their customers a reasonable price for their services.
It's a critical time. The consequences of missteps could be severe. Mr. Chairman, two more things that affect your job. It's not just monetary policy that threatens American pocketbooks. Some of my colleagues have threatened the nation's full faith and credit by holding the debt ceiling hostage for partisan politics. Instead of paying our bills on time, they're essentially threatening all Americans. The fifth.
Maybe we're not paying our bills on time, but that's definitely not keeping them from spending anything. They just need to go ahead and raise the debt ceiling because they're going to continue spending, and there's no way they're going to get inflation under control if they keep doing this.
Listening to Chairman Brown, I thought to myself, fascinating, truly fascinating. I concluded that, well, I know Chairman Brown pretty well. I am sure he is sincere in his rant. But let me just say this. Spending and printing trillions of dollars, caving to the radical left in this country, seeing policies posited and then implemented that led to the worst inflation in 40 years, seeing our inflation at 9.1%, seeing American families struggle because of the weight of the government on their shoulders, seeing the devastation from South Carolina to Ohio. It's unbelievable that the progressives in this country who caused a 9.1% inflation would then turn somewhere besides in the mirror to see the absolute devastation caused by their out-of-control spending is remarkable. Remarkable.
Amen.
To stop the out-of-control inflation caused by the out-of-control spending, the Fed steps in to cool the economy. Well, the definition of cooling the economy is necessary because we've seen the most radical approach to a problem that was in our rearview mirror being used as a Trojan horse to bring in a level of socialism and spending that our nation has not seen in my lifetime. The facts are very simple. When you get to 9.1% inflation in this nation, as a kid who grew up in a single-parent household, mired in poverty, a 40% today, 100% just a year ago increase in the gas prices devastates single mothers around this country. For senior.
And it's laughable that the president goes on Twitter and talks about how he's brought down gas prices so dramatically. It's just a spit in the face to everybody and all the families that are struggling out here with this shitty economy. How the hell do they think that we can't actually see what the prices of gas are? Like we didn't know or we can't remember what the price of gas was 2 years ago. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's ludicrous and absolutely insane. Just because Biden's brain is totally melted doesn't mean that ours is. What the fuck is he thinking?
On fixed income, whose savings are being depleted with an average cost just last month of a $433 increase because of inflation. For my friends on the other side of the aisle to look any place besides a mirror, I find stunning. The truth is that when your food prices go up over 20%, when your electricity is up over 20%, you have to ask yourself, where in the world are they? They cannot be in this universe. It must be an alternate universe where, in fact, it's okay for us to see prices go through the roof and our economy not stumble, but fall into a ditch. Why are we in the ditch? Because progressives used the pandemic as a way to usher in a form of spending that takes the money out of the pockets of everyday Americans and puts it in the coffers of the government. As I look around the country and I ask myself, how devastating is it that today it costs $433 more than it did a year ago? The answer is it is a crisis. When the average family in our country just a couple of years ago didn't have $400 in their savings for an emergency, to have prices go up by this amount, it's devastating. To have a conversation about rents around the country, looking at the inflationary effect and the absolute devastation of a snarling supply chain that we haven't seen in my lifetime, run by my friends in the progressives. Unbelievable.
That was an amazing point about how people didn't have enough money for a $400 emergency, but now everything has gone up so much that we're basically having to pay that much money every single month. Like, what the hell is going on? How do they think that the economy is continuing to run really hot? Obviously, that's the reason why credit cards are being maxed out, and that's why the economy is actually in a definite recession, but it's just not showing up in the numbers yet. People are being 100% devastated, but yet our government just sits here and says in our face that everything is going fine. How long are the people going to deal with this and just let these people say whatever the hell they want to say? It's insane to me that the government just straight up lies to everybody, yet for some reason we can't all agree that they just suck. Why are the people so divided? It's really just the government against the people, not the people against the people, but somehow they've directed the narrative in such a way that it actually does have us divided on this subject. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, I'm sure you can go to the grocery store and realize that we're all dealing with a lot of pain here. But for some reason, some people are just so damn brain dead that they're actually happy with what the president is doing.
The data from January on employment, consumer spending, manufacturing production, and inflation have partly reversed the softening trends that we'd seen in the data just a month ago. Some of this reversal likely reflects the unseasonably warm weather in January in much of the country. Still,
really, that's probably what it was that sent the market down. He said that they were starting to see inflation start to tick back up, basically, and that means that they probably do have a lot more work to do whenever it comes to raising interest rates.
job gains remained very strong in January, while the supply of labor has continued to lag. As of the end of December, there were 1.9 job openings for each unemployed individual, close to the all-time peak recorded last March, while unemployment insurance claims have remained near historical lows.
So really, he didn't just say that inflation was starting to come back, but also that the job market is getting a lot tighter because it's coming back to its near all-time highs. Obviously, he wants to get this unemployment rate up so that it will bring inflation down. But if the job market is actually continuing to heat up, then probably so will inflation.
Although inflation has been moderating in recent months, the process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go and is likely to be bumpy. As I mentioned, the latest economic data have come in stronger than expected, which suggests that the ultimate level of interest rates is likely to be higher than previously anticipated. If the totality of the...
And if those first two blows weren't enough, then there it really was. He laid it straight out for you. We're probably going to be seeing more interest rate hikes than what's currently priced into the market, meaning that we probably have a little bit more downward momentum to go, at least in the stock market. I still personally don't think that cryptocurrency is going to make another lower low, but that doesn't mean that we won't have more significant retracements in our future. But that doesn't mean that what the Fed does won't have us seeing some dips in the market, It just means that we probably won't be seeing any lower low than what we saw from the panic from the FTX collapse.
Data were to indicate that faster tightening is warranted, we'd be prepared to increase the pace of rate hikes. Restoring price stability will likely require that we maintain a restrictive stance of monetary policy for some time. Our overarching focus.
I'm still telling you guys, there's no way they're going to be able to continue raising rates after the debt ceiling has to be raised. The government is talking about trying to raise taxes right now, but with us going into a recession and people's earnings being devastated, there's not going to be enough income for them to actually be able to raise taxes. And another option would be that the government would have to slow down on spending, and we all can just have a good laugh on that one because it's definitely not going to happen. And since those two options are absolutely out of the question, the only other thing that's left to do is for the Fed to continue buying bonds and adding them to the balance sheet. In other words, doing quantitative easing. That means printing, and we all know where that money goes, straight into assets.
Focus is using our tools to bring inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. The historical record cautions strongly against prematurely loosening policy. We will stay the course until the job is done.
It really does. The reason that we saw inflation continue to be high and then Volcker actually had to devastate the whole economy was because they kept prematurely lowering interest rates whenever it looked like the economy was slowing down in the 70s. This saw inflation running totally rampant, and with the inflation readings ticking up in the last CPI reading, it looks like they are going to have to either take an example from that era of raising inflation in the 70s and actually raise rates some more and try to tackle the inflation and keep it down, or we're going to be seeing a repeat of the 70s, and the Fed is probably going to be losing all credibility.
Many drivers of inflation, corporate greed, rising inequality, supply chain disruptions, Russia's bestiality, if you will, in Ukraine, won't get better because of interest rate increases. Every indication is that this post-pandemic economy is different.
No, I won't, as a matter of fact. What is he talking about? That's not what bestiality means. Bestiality might be how this guy has the brain of a donkey, but it's definitely not how you can describe what's going on in Ukraine.
If policies were in place that were actually allowing energy prices to come down in the United States, then you would have less of a need to use the very blunt tools that you do have right now with regard to increasing rate increases. Is that a fair statement, sir?
In a sense, it is, but I would just say on energy,
I'm not trying to get you to a policy discussion with what the president's doing on his energy policy. I just want to make it clear that you have to respond to what's in front of you, and it doesn't matter where the inflation is coming from or what's driving it up. You're simply trying to bring it back down to that 2% number with the only tools that you've really got.
Whenever the price of energy goes up, then so does inflation. It always follows because it takes energy to get products to locations for people to buy them. And it takes energy, obviously, to manufacture goods. So like I've said in the past, if the government doesn't stop spending, and if they don't cut it out with this ESG bullcrap, then there's no way they're getting inflation under control, and it's going to continue to run rampant, and there's absolutely nothing the Fed is going to be able to do about it, because as they just got done saying, his tools are just too blunt for that.
To remind my colleagues that there are more than 62 million Latinos that call the United States home. We are the largest minority group in the country. We account for nearly 20% of the United States population. We contribute almost $3 trillion in GDP. Yet Latinos have no representation in the Federal Reserve's leadership. In the 109-year history of the Federal Reserve, there has never been a single member of the Board of Governors or regional bank president who has the lived experience of being Latino in the United States.
Who cares? Who cares? This guy's just wasting everybody's time. Isn't picking somebody for a job based solely on race racist? Shouldn't we choose people based on their qualifications or maybe their experience or something like that? This guy is out of his mind, and he's trying to make this whole country regress. We cannot be choosing people for positions and jobs based on solely race. It's absolutely insanity.
And in practice, that means that the voices of nearly 1/5 of our country's people are repeatedly drowned out when the Fed is making critical decisions on economic policy.
This guy's a freaking moron. This doesn't have anything to do with bringing inflation down, so let's just go on to the next person.
Powell, thank you for being here.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you to you and your team for helping to save the economy during the pandemic meltdown. When Congress spends money, it stimulates the economy, does it not?
Well, it would depend on whether that's funded by tax increases or not. So
It would depend on whether we actually send all of that money to Ukraine and it takes a while for it to trickle back down into our economy, or if we're actually going to be spending it on stuff like stimulus checks and other senseless nonsense.
If Congress reduced the rate of growth in its spending and reduced the rate of growth in its debt accumulation,
My man.
it would make your job easier in reducing inflation, would it not?
Absolutely.
I don't think fiscal policy right now is a big factor driving inflation at this moment, but it's absolutely essential that we do slow the pace of growth, particularly for the areas of the budget.
All right, let's try to unpack this then. I'm not trying to trick you. You're raising interest rates. You're raising interest rates to slow the economy, are you not?
Yes, to cool the economy off.
And one of the ways you measure your success, other than fluctuation in gross domestic product, is the unemployment rate. Is it not?
Yes, one of the measures.
Okay. So in effect, I'm not being critical. When you're slowing the economy, you're trying to put people out of work. That's your job, is it not?
Not really. We're trying to restore price stability.
No, you're
I mean, that's kind of what he's trying to do. He just can't really exactly say that for some reason. I don't know why the hell he can't just go ahead and say it and get it out of the damn way. I mean, everybody can just read through the lines and see that's what's actually going on here.
you're trying to raise
Not
the
wages.
you're trying to raise the unemployment rate.
There are a lot, so
And
there are a lot
that mean I know you don't like the phrase, so let me strike it. You're trying to raise the unemployment rate, are you not?
No, we're
Yes.
not trying to raise it. We're trying to realign supply and demand, which could happen through a bunch of channels. Like, for
Which requires bringing up the unemployment rate.
example, just job openings.
All right,
Job
let me,
openings
let me
could,
put it another way, okay? The Economist did a wonderful study. They looked at 10 disinflationary periods in America going all the way back to the 1950s. Disinflation is what you're trying to do. It's a slowing in the rate of inflation. Am I right?
yes.
In other words, prices don't go down, they just don't go up as fast. Deflation is when prices actually go down. You're trying to achieve disinflation, are you not?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Based on history, in the 10 times that we got inflation down, disinflation since the 1950s, in order to reduce inflation by 2%, unemployment had to go up 3.6%. Now that's history,
Wow.
is it not?
Yep.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yes, the standard has been that there
Pretty
have
sure
been
that's
recessions and
accurate.
downturns when
Okay.
the Fed has tried to reduce
Now,
inflation.
Those numbers, I don't know about the numbers being exactly accurate, but it's pretty much one for one, almost. The data does lag, so probably the unemployment rate comes up a little bit faster than inflation actually comes down. But in the end, it pretty much balances out.
now the current inflation rate 6.4% and the current unemployment rate is 3.4%. Now, if history is right, I'm not asking you to again blame anybody, but if history is right, unless you get some help, in order to get inflation down from 6.4% to, let's say, 4.4%, and the unemployment rate is going to have to rise to 7% based on this.
I don't know about that because I think that they might actually meet each other kind of in the middle. If you could raise the unemployment rate to about 5%, then maybe the inflation rate would come back down and meet around 5% as well.
History.
That's what the record would say.
Okay. And to get inflation down to 2.2%, based on history, an immutable fact, unemployment would have to go to 10.6%. Would it not?
No, I wouldn't.
That's what the record shows. That's what the history shows.
Yeah,
That might actually be accurate. I'm not sure, but I think that they would kind of meet in the middle a little bit. They really always just over tighten or overstimulate, and so things go all the way in another direction with a whipping action. But I don't think that that's what they actually have to do. If they would just actually pay attention and realize that it does work with long and variable lags, as they say, then we could probably get inflation down without actually bringing unemployment up above the rate of inflation.
Reluctant to admit it, and you don't want to get in the middle of a policy dispute. But I think it's undeniable. It's undeniable that the only way we're going to get this sticky inflation down is to attack it on the monetary side, which you're doing, and on the fiscal side, which means Congress has got to reduce the rate of growth of spending and reduce the rate of growth of debt accumulation.
Absolutely.
I get that you don't want to get in the middle of that fight. But the more we help on the fiscal side, the fewer people you're going to have to put out of work. Isn't that?
And while he doesn't want to have that argument, we're going to have that argument eventually, or else inflation is just not going to get under control. And like I said, there's not anything they're going to be able to do about it. Ignoring the problem doesn't make it not exist, And if we could just be honest, and if the Fed could actually say what they really need to say, then we could probably have a more smoothly running economy.
Is that a fact?
Please answer.
Could work out that way.
Sir?
It could work out that way.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Reed of Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Powell, for being here today. We saw in the wake of COVID the globalized supply chain disrupted significantly, and we're in the process, in some respects, of rebuilding a supply chain with emphasis on sourcing in the United States. To what extent did that disruptive supply chain contribute to inflation, and to what extent will the new, if you envision it, the new supply chain that is located
Does this guy have his jaw wired shut or something? Why is he mumbling like this? I don't think I have time for this.
In the coming year, what factors and indicators are you paying attention to as you and the Federal Open Market Committee decide on whether to increase rates?
That's a good question. It would be good to know what kind of data they're actually looking at if they weren't going to change the data that they're looking at every meeting almost. Obviously, he's been saying that they're looking at core inflation to come down, but that's not going to come down unless energy inflation comes down, and core obviously doesn't count that.
So when you're looking at this, obviously not to get into a policy discussion, but if there were an increase of energy production in this country, do you feel like that would help drive down inflation?
Well, I think over time, more energy would mean lower energy prices. But we are very focused on what we call core inflation, because that is what is driven by really by demand, and our tools are really aimed at demand.
Right, understood. But I feel like the cost of energy.
Yes, of course, they're trying to get core to come down, but it's being influenced by the price of energy and by fiscal spending.
Is not just what you pay at the pump. It ends up affecting every good across this great nation. Additionally, I'd like to ask you about labor participation. So when you look at the unemployment rate, and we've heard my colleagues discuss people having to be displaced in order for us to maybe get to the inflation rate that we would like as a nation, I'd like to focus on the labor participation rate. So right now it's 62.4%. If there were an increase in people coming back into the workforce, would that be a positive factor with regards to driving us down to the 2% rate that you would want to achieve?
Well, it probably would be, but right now we're having the biggest generation in all of history retiring, and a lot of them were actually pushed into retirement because of stuff like the jab mandates and things like that. Also, with welfare being on the rise and with the government paying people just to stay home, who the hell is going to come back into the workforce whenever they don't have to, and whenever jobs just suck and you're not getting paid enough to actually pay for inflation? It almost makes more sense for people just to live off of the government, and that's not going to help inflation come down in any kind of way.
I think that it would. I mean, remember those people coming into jobs,
Yes.
that would be great, because the economy clearly wants more people than are currently working. Of course, those people would then spend more, so it wouldn't be a zero-sum game, but it would be great for the country and great for them if they were to come into the labor force.
Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
God.
So the Fed has raised interest rates 8 times over the last year in what has been the most extreme rate hike cycle in 40 years. The Fed's goal is to slow inflation, and your tool, raising interest rates, is designed to slow the economy and throw people out of work. So far, you haven't tipped the economy
Give
into
me a
recession, but
break.
you haven't brought inflation entirely under control either. And maybe the reason for that is that other things are also keeping prices high, things you can't fix with high interest rates, things like price gouging and supply chain kinks and a war in Ukraine. But you are determined to continue to raise interest rates, so I want to take a look at where you're headed.
Boy, who the hell? Of course, she's one to talk about the war in Ukraine causing this inflation. Of course, I mean, these are the motherfuckers that want the war in Ukraine. What are these guys talking about? And yeah, he's trying to bring down inflation because whenever people can't afford things at the store, it doesn't matter if they're employed because they still can't afford shit. Duh.
In December, the Fed released its projections on the state of the economy under your monetary policy plan. According to the Fed's own report, if you continue raising interest rates as you plan, unemployment will be 4.6% by the end of the year, more than a full point higher than it is today. Chair Powell, if you hit your projections, do you know how?
And if he doesn't, then inflation is going to be at like 20%. So what the hell is she talking about? People don't just want to work just so that they can have a job and go to work. People want to work so that they can afford to do things and live a life. This lady is totally out of touch with reality, and she just needs to shut the hell up, honestly.
How many people who are currently working, going about their lives, will lose their jobs?
And if he doesn't, then how many people going about their daily lives are going to lose the ability to pay for food?
I don't have that number in front of me. I will say it's not
just
an
a math
intended
problem.
consequence. It's
Well,
not,
but it is, and it's in your report, and that would be
God.
about 2 million people who would lose their jobs, people who are working right now, making their mortgages. So Chair Powell, if you could speak directly to the 2 million.
They're only making their mortgages because they're putting it on their credit card. Come on now. Inflation is way too high and he has to get it under control or else people are not going to be able to pay their mortgages and they're not going to be able to afford food. So whatever the hell she's arguing about is just absolutely insane and it doesn't make any sense.
Hardworking people who have decent jobs today, who you're planning to get fired over the next year, what would you say to them? How would you explain your view that they need to lose their jobs?
That he's trying to make it to where they can actually afford to buy food in the first place so that they don't have to go to work just so that they can go to work and so that they can afford to go back to a place and sleep and go back to work. That's basically wage slavery and nobody wants to live like that. This is the kind of lifestyle that Elizabeth Warren wants you and your kids to have. She just wants you to be able to go to work and barely be able to afford food and that's it, just so you can go back to work.
I would explain to people more broadly that inflation is extremely high and it's hurting the working people of this country badly. All of them, not just 2 million of them, but all of them are suffering under high inflation, and we are taking the only measures we have to bring inflation down.
And putting 2 million people.
Yes, as a matter of fact, actually it is. And the reason why things are absolutely out of control already is because of all of the stupid spending that stupid people like this lady right here are doing.
Have to bear it.
Will working people be better off if we just walk away from our jobs and inflation remains 5-6%?
Let me ask you about what happens if you do this. Since the end of World War II, there have been 12 times in which the unemployment rate has increased by 1 percentage point within 1 year, exactly what you're aiming to do right now. How many of those times did the U.S. economy avoid falling into a recession?
You know, it's not as black and white as very
Just
very
looking at the numbers, it actually is pretty black
Alan
and white.
Blinder's written a book on this. And
Who cares? Honestly, I'm just trying to get this recession out of the way. This kind of crap is going to make us have to deal with a lot more pain until the recession comes, and then whenever the recession comes, it's going to be a lot more brutal because of that bullwhip action that we keep seeing over and over again.
There have been 12 times that we've seen a 1 point increase in the unemployment rate in a year. That's exactly what your Fed report has put out as the projection and the plan based on how you're going to keep raising these interest rates. How many times did the economy fail to fall into a recession after?
Who cares? Nobody cares about 4% of people losing their jobs whenever 100% of people almost can't afford to even eat. This lady pisses me off more than almost anybody in the whole world can. And if you live in Massachusetts, then I'm really sorry for you because this is who's representing you. You poor souls.
Doing that out of 12 times.
I think the number is 0.
I think the number is 0. That's exactly right. So then the question becomes,
how many times in history has the government gone on an insane spending spree without inflation going out of control? I think the number is also 0.
We've got 2 million people out of work. Can you stop it at 2 million people? History suggests that the Fed has a terrible track record of containing modest increases in the unemployment rate. Once the economy starts shedding jobs, it's kind of like a runaway train. It is really hard to stop. In fact, in 11 out of the 12 times that the unemployment rate increased by a full percentage point within 1 year, unemployment went on to rise another full percentage point on top of that. If that's what happens this time, we'd be looking at least 3.5 million people who would lose their jobs. So, Chair Powell, if you reach your goal and 2 million people get laid off by the end of this year, and then, just like in 11 out of 12 times that unemployment has risen by a point in a single year, it keeps on rising, and then we've got 2.5 million people out of work, we've got 3 million people who get laid off, we've got 3.5 million people who get laid off. What's your plan?
Don't worry, I'm sure they'll print lots of more money and they might even just start doing universal basic income. That's probably where this shit is headed because there's no way they're getting inflation under control. And whenever the shit does hit the fan again, they are going to have to print. And they're going to give money straight to people like they did in the past.
Well, right now the unemployment rate is 3.4%, which is the lowest in 54 years. And we actually don't think that we need to see a sharp or enormous increase in unemployment to get inflation under control.
I'm looking at your projections. Do you call laying off 2 million people this year not a sharp increase in unemployment?
I would say 4.5%.
Explain that to the 2 million families who are going to be out of work.
We're not targeting any of that. But I would say even 4.5% unemployment is well better than most of the time for the last 75 years.
In other words, you don't have a plan to stop a runaway train if it occurs. Chair Powell, you are gambling with people's lives, and there's a pile of data showing the price gouging and supply.
Look who the hell is talking. I mean, honestly, this lady is absolutely delusional. I'm done with this garbage. Let's move on.
Senator Kramer of North Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Powell, for being here. And I can't resist responding to a few things that my friends on the left have said. For example, in his opening statement, Chairman Brown had a long list of things that raising interest rates won't do. Raising interest rates won't fill in the blank. I'm going to fill in the blank with a couple things. How about raising interest rates won't stop Senate Democrats and President Biden from overtaxing, overspending, overborrowing, overregulating? Chairman Brown said we should rebuild our supply chain by curbing offshoring, corporate offshoring. I agree. He talked a lot about corporate greed contributing to inflation. Okay.
I can't say it enough times. Honestly, there's just no way they're getting inflation under control with the amount of spending that the government is doing.
But how about regulatory greed contributing to corporate greed? How do you expect corporations to reinvest money if you overregulate their ability to invest that money right here in the United States of America? You want to onshore some things? How about energy policy? How about instead of looking to Venezuela or Iran for oil supply or Russia, or rather than looking to China for electric vehicles and chips and solar panels, how about we have a strategy that onshores those things by reducing regulation, reducing taxes, and letting those corporations reinvest their profits rather than stock buybacks or dividends?
That sounds like a great idea, but it's just not woke. What do you expect to happen? For some reason, it's not politically correct for us to drill for oil here, but it's fine for us to outsource it to other countries that hate us and where they probably have dirtier technology and means of extracting oil from the ground, which is probably a lot worse for the environment. You know what they say, though, out of sight and out of mind.
The Federal Reserve is supposed to keep inflation in check while half of the government works against it is mind-boggling. Now, I know, Mr. Chairman, you don't like to comment on policy. You and I have been around and around about this. You were anxious to advise us to spend lots of money during the pandemic. I don't think a lot of people blame you for that. You wouldn't respond to efforts by the Biden administration after we were in a robust recovery from not spending so much money. Okay, I can appreciate the change. But now we're in this debate between Republicans and Democrats, between particularly the House Speaker and the President, on how to raise the debt ceiling. And you've made some pretty strong comments about raising the debt ceiling, absent from structural reforms that would actually help us get back to a reasonable growth. So I warn you again, if you're going to make political comments, if you're going to advise us on policy, be consistent with it. Now, I want to get back to the greening of the Federal Reserve and this.
I mean, I really couldn't have said it any better myself. There's no way, while half of the government is trying to spend all of the money in existence and print more just so that they can spend more, that we're going to be able to get inflation under control. Because as Milton Friedman basically said, there's no inflation in history that hasn't been backed up by insane money printing by governments. It's just the way that it is, and you can't bring down inflation unless you bring down the printing. All right, there was a lot more interesting points by a lot more people, but this hearing has been going on for way too long, and to keep this video from going on way too long, I'm just going to go ahead and summarize this situation and tell you that there's no way that they're bringing inflation down unless they stop printing, and there's just nothing the Fed can do about that. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's just the facts. There's nothing that they can do, and I don't know why everybody is still having a debate about this. The US dollar has been doomed since Nixon took it off the gold standard in 1971. It's just taken it up until this point for the debt situation to get so out of control that they can't continue raising rates because we won't be able to service all of the debt, and our economy is basically going to collapse one way or another. Either the Fed is going to smother the economy by trying to bring down inflation, or inflation is going to run so out of control that people aren't going to be able to buy things, and that's going to crash the economy anyway. Let me know in the comments, which path do you think we're headed down? Either way, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Oh, hey, I was just being chased by a bear. Watch out. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell too, because I don't want you to miss out on any important updates. And check out this video. Oh crap, I gotta get out of here.